It's always very nice to see the number of attendees, the list of attendees starting to populate very quickly when we start broadcast the webinar. Today is no exception. So I'll switch my video on since we have that facility to, in the discussion, have some people in the room whose videos are on, but there are of course a lot of us whose videos aren't on that are here too. So Daryl, I'm not sure, you're always the first one to sign in, you're the early bird. It's nice to see old IBASA figures like Div in the room, some new names too, Julian, Joseph, I see that you've signed in as an attendee, so we'll quickly promote you to a panelist because we would like to see your face while we listen to you too. This is what this technology helps us to do. So, by the way, towards the end of today's webinar, we hope to have enough time so that we can inject some of the attendees, you guys that are showing up for this webinar, to take part in the discussion by switching on your camera and video too. So if you have something that you would like to share in terms of the debate, and I'm sure it's going to be quite a vigorous one, this is a really important topic that we're tackling today, that you'll have the chance to do so too. Even if you didn't sign up with that idea, you may end up appearing in the webinar today. So many of you are already kind of very familiar with how we do these webinars. We're about 30 people in the room, no, a bit more, with the panelists, 40 people in the room. So Philip, Priscilla, Rashaf, Rob, Sar, Simbongile, Terence, some of these names we keep seeing coming, so that's great. Max, Joy, Gloria. If I can ask that you open the chat window, there's this little box that you click, Q&A, you'll see audio settings, Q&A, chat, and raise a hand. By the way, later on you may find it useful to raise your hand. You may join us during the webinar and participating through the chat. And if I ask that you open that now, and you can say, I see some of you have already done that. So thanks, Max, Div, Itzina, Itisani, sorry for that mispronunciation, Shengatai. Good morning, everyone. If you can use this opportunity to not only say good morning there, but if you can type in there from where you are and what your specialty in business advising is. It's in the past been used by some of us to connect with each other when we want to do joint projects. And by the way, our topic today is very relevant in this regard too, because we are talking about different modes of support. And of course, we're not always specialists in all the modes of support that are needed by our clients. But that's enough said for me. If I can, by the way, my name is Christoph Oosthuizen. I'm the CEO of the Entrepreneurial Planning Institute, who is hosting these webinars, these monthly webinars, along with IBASA, the Institute for Business Advisors, which is the membership organization representing our interest. And today's discussion is definitely very much down that line about what our interests are in this industry and how we build it out into really meaningful and impactful ways of supporting entrepreneurs and small businesses in building out their businesses. I mean, that's our job ultimately. So in the room, if I may ask that the panelists switch on the cameras. Cameras for now is okay. You don't need to do the video as well. I see there's Johan Potgieter, the first one. So Johan is a IBASA board member, by the way, and also the regional chair of IBASA in Mpumalanga. We also have in the room, I'll give you the chance to see them just now too. Nomvuyo Bengani, she's from BizOil, ICF accredited coach. We've got Grant Novell from Pre-Risk in the consulting field with small businesses. We've got Fazine Bana from the Thinking Partners, who's doing a lot of ESD, enterprise and supply development programs. And then, of course, our old guard, Joseph Chiwilawilo, the IBASA CEO, and Lesego Mokwena, the senior manager at IBASA. We also have in the room from the EPI Carl Venter, who's kind of keeping the controls there in the back going so that we can all learn during this hour and a half, in fact, today that we have together. So those are the people in the room. Like we always do, first going to turn to IBASA to ask what's up at IBASA, what's news. By the way, maybe Carl, if I can ask you that you just share that slide with a link on that everyone can see where to go to. If you're not a IBASA member yet, please follow this link that we'll show you now, or maybe we'll show it after. Oh, there it is. Yes. IBASA member.the-epi.org. It's just a link taking you through to a form, and that will go through to the IBASA office to follow up with you. Or if you want to regrade, you can also fill out that form and to notify them that you are looking at the regrading. Great. So before we jump into the topic, which is how do we choose the mode of support, consulting, training, mentoring, coaching, to make sure that those are impactful interventions that we have with our clients. Let's turn to IBASA and our CEO, Mr. Joseph Chiwilawilo, to give us a quick update on what is happening at IBASA and what IBASA members should be noting. So welcome, Joseph.
Thank you so much, Chris, and greetings to all panelists and everybody who's attending this webinar today. We really appreciate your taking your time off your businesses to be with us this morning, looking at the profession that is becoming very popular and very important in our country. And it is for that reason that we have invited these experts and people who have been in the trade for many years to come and share how we could further shape the profession going forward. And I believe the presenters today are going to be enlightening us about various aspects of business advising, which we believe business advising is a comprehensive name, an overall name for various aspects of business interventions. So thank you so much for having availed yourself. Now, this is a special year for IBASA. We have turned 20 this year. So next year we will be a serious young man at 21. So we're looking forward to be celebrating this. And members, you will be informed appropriately. It looks like that week of the 12th to the 15th, we would like to ask our members if you can to reserve that week because we probably will be having a big event in Ekurhuleni at the Birchwood Hotel where you will be invited, but you will be informed. We're looking at that date to launch our Gauteng chapter and also the youth chapter with 2 TVET colleges and also a university. So it's going to be a very exciting period for our year where we shall also be launching our celebrations of the 20th year of the Institute in the country. We believe, I'm sure some of you are aware that this year we're not going to have the International Conference on Business Advising, similar to the one that we had last year. This year we're going to have a roadshow of ICBA business, of ICBA conference. So we will be going around, and the partnering organizations, the Department of Small Business, CEDA, Services CETA, and IBASA, also including many other professional bodies like Comensa and SAIPA, are partners in the ICBA roadshow that will be taking place this year, and also included is SEED, another organization that is actually even sponsoring IBASA to create standards. We are in the process of discussing with many professionals to try and create standards for business advising. So if you believe you can make inputs in this respect, please do contact me. The email is co@ibasa.org.za so that we can include you in the panel that will be discussing further professionalizing business advising and the creation of standards. We're being assisted by the Bureau of Standards. South African Bureau of Standards are helping us to put together the standards, and various other international organizations. We're also looking, by the way, at international standards that are there. But unfortunately, we don't necessarily have a standards that is directed overall at business advising. But we are looking at some that were referred to us by SABS, that we should look at those, because they may be indeed the standards that can be useful for this profession going forward. And we would like to invite our members. We shall be signing contract to support SMMEs. And we believe that those who are our members who are not in good standing will lose the opportunity. As we speak, the University of Johannesburg and the services CETA are actually in Ekurhuleni, in the part of Ekurhuleni, piloting a project of a new venture creation learnership level 2, where people are being introduced to entrepreneurship, and those people be left without being supported after having started their businesses. So now 250 people will be, I think today they're starting to register, will be identified, and they will be trained. So can you imagine if they are trained properly, and each and every one of those 250 can create 2 jobs? That will immediately give us 750 people who are employed in the country. And that can be a serious multiplier effect in building this economy. And we need people who can indeed equip themselves. It is for that reason that we have made CPDs compulsory, so that our members should always, it's CPDs and CPEs, continued professional development and education, so that our members can equip themselves and make themselves ready for various opportunities that will help the country and our entrepreneurs as they get into business, getting the relevant support. And today, we believe we're going to be informed as to how best we can support SMMEs. As I conclude, I am an accountant, and some of my clients still call me, my bookkeeper is here. I'm not a bookkeeper, I'm an accountant. So it's because of not knowing, not understanding. And some call me, my auditor is here. I'm not an auditor. I'm not allowed to audit books. I cannot sign financial statements, but I'm an accountant. So it's that kind of language where we call a person, a coach, an accountant, a mentor, a business advisor, not knowing exactly the specialty that they are. So business advising does have specialties. Accountants are business advisors, engineers are business advisors, and so is even lawyers and tax practitioners. The list goes on. And some managers, CEOs, and all that, they are indeed business advisors. So without really taking so much time, I believe I have, but maybe about IBASA as I conclude again, sorry. Let me briefly, I don't know if Chris Lisiko is going to be speaking about IBASA. We are a professional body, and we are recognized by SAQA in terms of the NQF Act of 2008. And for us to be recognized as a professional body, we have to comply with certain things. And amongst those, it's making sure that our members, we have a code of conduct for our members, and we enforce the code of conduct for our members, and also making sure that our members have got code. I mean, they also adhere to the continued professional development and education. And that in the event where a member has erred, we do have a process of disciplining them. Those are some of the things that we are required to have or do. as a professional body in the country. And we do have 3 designations at the moment: a BA entry level PBA, which is the tier, the middle tier, and certified business advisor. We grade, which is core business for IBASA. What we do is to grade and accredit business advisors in the country. Those who regard and consider themselves professional business advisors, we grade them and accredit them. And I believe so far we are the only professional body in the country that grades business advisors across the board, the profession of business advising, consulting, coaching, mentoring, counseling. Thank you so much. I nearly said amen.
No, we'll stop before you say that.
Thank you so much.
Not Sunday today.
Yes. Thank you.
But there's an important message that you're giving us, and that is that we already have a standard in a way through the grading. So the whole thing of standards, of course, is something that's being debated now and so on, but IBASA, of course, through its grading system already has set some standards. And if you're not a graded member of IBASA yet, or if you've gained so much experience in the past year or two that you want to regrade, please make contact with the office by filling out that little form quickly. Perhaps Lesego or Carl, if you can just, I'm not sure exactly what that address is, if you can just type that address into the chat too, so people can easily find that, the one that we showed on the slide just now. But thank you very much, our CEO, for sharing that information. So there's lots to look forward, including a link to the topic that we have today, the issue of standards and standard setting. So there's an invitation for IBASA members to be joining the IBASA team there in that discussion. But let's jump into what we have today, namely the choices that we make in the support that we give our clients. And I'm a practicing mentor, coach, consultant sometimes. So this is for me a very pertinent topic, because I can look back to where my relationship with my clients went haywire, or where the project really didn't work. And in many, if not most of the instances, I can afterwards relate it back to making choices in terms of the mode of support that were not appropriate. So this is really important one, I think. But before we get to the, let's get the idea of who's in the room. Before we jump into the discussion, if we may ask, I'm launching a poll there, so you should be able to see in that window the polls. The panelists can also participate in the poll. Which mode of support do you offer? So you can select all of them if you're doing all of them, not likely. But choose there, are you in training, consulting, advising, mentoring, coaching, or counseling, or other? Maybe something else that we are not aware of. So as people are voting there, there are a lot of them that are in consulting. I think that's JMT you wanted as the, I'll just mute you quickly. Quite a mix as it is coming up there. We'll come back to the result of this just now, so please keep waiting. But in the meantime, I want to introduce to you Johan Potgieter. Johan, if you may switch on your camera and your voice, then we can hear you too. Johan, of course, is a IBASA board member, and they're from the eastern side of our country, the beautiful areas there that a lot of tourist visits to. Johan, this has been a topic that you've been considering a while. In fact, if I'm not wrong, you are busy writing a doctor's thesis relating to this topic. So if we can ask that you introduce us to these choices that we have in terms of the modes of discussion, and your thoughts on, you know, sort of what should best practice be? How should we frame this so that we, as an industry, as a profession, we can take this forward and have a common understanding of how we are doing this?
Thank you, Christoph. Thank you also, Joseph, and good morning to the fellow panelists, Fazan, Boyo, and Grant. Grant, it's good to see you participating in this. And I've also noticed there's a number of expertise that participants that have joined us. Max Uder, for instance, who might not remember me, but I still remember him, Div, and of course, many others. Now, I would like to start off, if one just look at it, that first slide there, it's not because of my wisdom, but I found a lot of truth in that statement there. And we'll get to that a bit later when we talk about creating rapport and matching a mentor and a mentee or business advisor and a client. But let me start off by saying I don't regard myself as an expert. I just have a keen interest in small business, and particularly in a rural context. And this is also what my thesis is about. The title of the thesis, just by the way, is Small Enterprise Support in Rural Mpumalanga, a Systemic Perspective Towards Sustainability. Now, I must admit, I'm not really very proud about my progress here. Christoph and Carl know this because we spoke about it. In fact, this is how the topic actually came about a couple of weeks ago when we spoke about this. So because of the variables, I mean, the variables just adds up and adds up and adds up all the time. So, but I'm not giving up because I love this industry so much. Now, the point that I want to sort of bring across is that there is no way that I don't have the wisdom or the knowledge to even attempt to redefine our industry. That's not the case here. It's not the intention. But through my research, I came across a number of let's call them challenges or issues that I find in my research that people grapple with. In fact, I grapple with them myself, and that is the reason why you see so many questions on that slide that's on there now. It is about providing a sort of an overview, a helicopter perspective in terms of what we should be thinking about when we go into the field and we work with these small businesses. Those questions are not even closely addressing all the issues, but that I found is something that would bring you closer to the right mode of support that you choose eventually. It might be different for many people. This is just what I found in my research, and I would like to just perhaps elaborate a little bit on each of those, and then maybe later on when there's the Q&A, we can talk about some of the questions or answers that you might have for these questions. Now, the first one that you notice there is, do we, as business advisors, and I'm not playing this down because I mean, we've got very excellent business advisors, and this is not a question to challenge your integrity or your, your intelligence. It's purely a question that one needs to just keep in mind when you look at your role as a business advisor. Just keep in mind that this whole discussion is in the context of IBASA. All right, so maybe you find business advisors that are not part of our organization or our professional body that might look at this differently. And I'm not saying that is incorrect, but this is in the context of IBASA. So IBASA is a terminology that we use, and I'm glad Joseph addressed it in his introduction there. It is an umbrella term that we use for support. Entrepreneurial support, and sometimes I feel a bit uncomfortable with just the entrepreneurial support that we speak about. In many cases, it's small business owners who are not necessarily entrepreneurs, and we can elaborate a little bit on that without getting too philosophical on this. So, do we understand where we fit into this? I know we've got excellent people like, I mean, the business rescuers that are amongst us. They're providing a specific service. support to clients. And you've got different industries. Remember, the industries that I'm talking about is the entrepreneurial support industry. So that's the field that we play on. But the other industries that sometimes needs specialist business advising, remember that's the umbrella term, is of course, if you look at businesses that are just about to start up, some of them, or businesses that are also established, and then the ones that want to expand. Now you would need different expertise in each of those fields, regardless of your designation. I'm just talking about the different types of businesses that one would work with. And then, of course, there's the manufacturing, the services industry, transport, and all of those. And I personally, and that's just a personal experience that I had, is that if you don't know much about transport and you want to assist a business in transport, you have to really consider your decision. You might be not the right person to do that, although some of the basics would be the same. For instance, if you take businesses that want to expand or that are in the import-export industries, you need specific expertise in that. And hence you'll see somewhere there along the line, I said in my questions, are you brave enough to walk away? And I don't mean that in any other way than just to say, but maybe I'm not the right person for this. And then to refer such a client to a person or a business advisor that you know are really qualified in that field. All right, and then the second point, I think I'm spending too much time on some of the points. The second one is, are we familiar with the scenarios where we encounter, and are we able to decide on the correct mode of support? Now, and I talk about the diagnostics there. I think that is probably the most crucial point on this slide is that I don't think we really spent, and I'm not trying to generalize here, but I think we're not spending too much time or adequate time on the situational analysis, because that will give us a lot of information in terms of what would be the right approach here, the mode of support, not approach. I don't want to confuse the terms here. And then perhaps I'm just going to jump to slide point 4 there. Sometimes, and that's just a natural reaction, we would like to, select and implement a mode of support that we are comfortable with, and which might not be the correct approach at that time. And hence, I'm going back to the situational analysis, rather than walk away if you feel that you're not up to it. Now, the point 5 there is the context in which the support takes place. Now, this is also a very important point, and also a big part of my studies. Not sure, it's a pity I don't see any DFIs or CFIs or CDAs participating. Well, not on the panel at least, but some might be participating as part of the participants there. In many cases, I've experienced that, the people that, and I remember my context is rural. When you interact with these people, there's a few paradoxes that I've picked up, at worst, but ironical issues as well that I come across, that that actually prompt me into looking at this further. The people that, or the business owners or entrepreneurs that we work with, the ones that needs it most is the ones that cannot really afford it. So they have to get some other model where they can get support, and that's where the governmental issues or support initiatives comes in. And I'm afraid to say it is not integrated in my experience. It is not holistic. It is not systemic. And sometimes it is actually contradictory. I might get a lot of flack for saying that, but that's how I experienced it in the field. And hence these private institutions that comes on board, and I think it is Fazan with his presentation will address that. The ESD model is a model for a funding model that we can use. In fact, we used it in the Middelburg projects that we did there. So to get an integrated systemic model is probably something beyond me. I'm honest when I say I really don't know the answers yet, but at least I'm trying to.
So, Jan, would you agree that the input from the various, if you want to call it disciplines or modes, is key in coming to that comprehensive understanding that you mentioned now?
Absolutely. You see, we have these. Previously, we worked through DTI, if you still remember, and now it's gone to IDC, and now we have the Department of Small Business Development, and all these different institutions. I get the feeling they're not really singing from the same page.
So for the discussion that we're starting here today and what will follow can contribute towards that. But can I ask perhaps that I see Carl is showing us that slide there of the different modes. If you could comment about your understanding about that, how we distinguish between these different ways of supporting entrepreneurs and business owners.
Yeah, this is actually a very nice slide that Carl came up with. It is something that sort of explains it visually quite nicely. On top, you'll see the 4 disciplines there, and then you have this continuum of support on the left-hand side, low, and the right-hand side, high, and where the support is low, there's more input from the facilitator. Where the support is quite high, and then we're moving over to mentoring and coaching, you'll see the input from the client is much higher. Now, there's just a little definition for consulting at the bottom there. You'll see it's solving a problem or implementing a solution, and/or. When we talk training, it's instructional advice and guidance. Now, there's different modes of training, and there are lots of experts that can elaborate on the training. It's mostly interactive lately. It's not as classroom training as we know in the past. Mentoring is guidance based on industry, business, and technical experience. And in a way, and I don't want to go to definitions now because it depends on who you speak to, and you'll probably get a different definition for each. But mentoring is seemingly, well, in my view, it is a more experienced person, and it is a person that is got industry experience in that specific industry. So it's more about guiding from a more expensive, well, sometimes it is more expensive, more experienced person, which is then called a mentor. And then on the right-hand side is the coaching part, open-ended questions, exploring possibilities, and that's non-directive. I would say from where in the middle, from that little visual there, the input from the client becomes more and more and more. Obviously, a mentor is not seen as a person that provides all the answers. It just directs and guides, and then the mentee would come up with the answers. Carl, if we can move on to the next slide. Also a slide that just probes one to think on, why do you interact with a specific client? Did the client engage you? Is it a matter of, and I'm deviating a little bit from that slide, Carl, you know, when you look at the funding models for these interventions, CEDA's got a certain approach, CIFA's got a certain approach, ESD funding has got a different approach. And sometimes you find these things work in projects. And I know that there are lots of individual interactions with clients where the client pays you for your services. But in my case, and remember again, it's a rural perspective. In my case, it can only really work on projects. Funding is the issues here. I see the slides now gone, Carl. Are you hurrying me up, Carl?
That's a not so subtle prompt. So if you can conclude there on that point, Johan, please.
Yeah, it's remember, it is different for different business advisors. I think the point I want to drive home is that you should keep these questions that I've been asking in mind when you go into selecting a certain mode of support. And perhaps just a last comment on that. In many cases, in my experience, the mode of support, and it's wrongly so, but it happens in reality, the funding model will determine the mode of support.
Yeah, so yes, there's a distortion in the market since the client can't support what is needed, perhaps. So the first question is what is needed, and thank you very much for shaping that for us. You know, questions like, are you prepared to walk away when what is needed is not what you're the expert in, or what your expertise lies in, your knowledge and experience. But then there's also an element that that client then afford your services, and if there's a funder involved, and there are many. You mentioned enterprise development services. There's the CEDA you mentioned, you know, sort of their priorities. So it may, in fact, we may do a mentorship project because CEDA is sponsoring mentorship, but in fact what is needed is a training project because that was in fact what was needed. But because money is available for mentorship, we go and implement a mentorship project, or because I am a mentor and therefore I go implement a mentorship. So those are quite important considerations for us as professionals. So thanks for framing that for us, Johan. Also that the graph that was put up, you know, sort of the continuum. So we can see these are not kind of standalone kind of silos. There's a continuum from directive to supportive, and the role that the service provider, the practitioner plays with the client, and they both have a role to play, and you know, sort of the one gets more involved or less involved, and it's more supportive or less supportive. So there's a framework that we can use too in understanding this. And I would love people to comment. I see Dib is commenting, Luther has commented there, Lynn, Lesego, and so on. You know, sort of. Please participate. By the way, you can also put up your hand. There's a button to raise your hand. If you would like to be injected towards the end of the webinar in having the discussion. And then I see Sahar has noted a question there. So if you have a question, please go to the QA and note down your question so that we can answer those questions too. Thank you very much for putting up the results. Carl, you can see that most of us are describing ourselves as advisors, and we're doing consulting and training too. Some of us are also doing mentorship, about half, and about a third offering coaching services too. So there's quite a big representation of people in the 60 or close to 70 people that we are in the room right now. Thanks, Johan. So let's move on to, so you mentioned enterprise supply development as a mode of support or a framework within which support happens. And we've got Fazine Bana of the Thinking Partners in the room. that's got quite a bit of experience in enterprise supply development. So, Fazin, from a ESD perspective, and implementing projects and those that you're involved in your experience, this choosing between different modes of support and designing interventions for the entrepreneurs and in the paying clients, we've heard, is an important factor too. How does that play out in your world? Remember, you must unmute.
Yeah. Yes, that's exactly what I was doing. Thanks, Carl, and thanks, Johan, for that. That was very thought-provoking. I did particularly like your one question, even when I saw it this morning, are we willing to walk away? And I think the honest answer there, which leads to the rest of my presentation, is even myself have to admit now to everybody, wow, that there have been times when I've not walked away, and it's simply being an ESD practitioner, needing to build up a portfolio so I can continue to sell my services. Yeah, so it's a bit of a tough one. It's a conundrum. How do you find the right mode of support for beneficiaries? Just a little bit of context. Started off implementing ESD programs. I've done coaching, a little bit of mentoring, training on business skills. I've done advisory work, and then started asking myself a similar question maybe 3 years back. And had built up enough of a portfolio, and I suppose leveraged enough big client names to be able to say, right, now how do we offer you something that's custom fit for the participants or the beneficiaries that corporates have selected to be on their different ED and SD programs. So Carl, you can actually flip to the next slide. Just a little bit of where I get the information that I get. It comes from having engaged with entrepreneurs on the ground or business owners on the ground, offering the various modes of support, sometimes successfully, sometimes have to admit to myself, even unsuccessfully. And I've tried to start measuring sort of satisfaction with what they're being offered. We can actually just go to the next slide as well. So that was just giving you a bit of context as to where the information comes. So I've moved a lot into the program design side of things, and designing specifically ED and SD programs for my corporate clients and for other ESD service providers. And we've trialed a number of different things. We've had, obviously there's been sometimes a push from a client. I mean, even now at the moment, I've got a client that has taken what I call my core offering, which I at the moment feel is the most holistic way that I can design and implement a program, and has split them into 2 different programs. So one group of businesses on an ED program is only getting training. And then there's another group that's only getting coaching. So very isolated modes, and there's no overlap there. So it does still happen. So what I've tried to do is design programs using a human-centered approach. I use a lot of design thinking methodology. So you can look that up, but very briefly, design thinking methodology speaks to exactly, I think what we're trying to achieve is using empathy to gain an understanding of the best way or the best mode to use to support businesses that are currently on ESD programs. And it does mean that I have to go back to the drawing board for every single client and every proposal that I submit. So it's extremely time consuming and extremely tedious. And for the first time in my life, I think I find myself sometimes running out of ideas. So what's changed from when I started, where it used to be typically a training and coaching intervention that was offered on ESD programs. We've started adding mentoring. So that was one iteration, and it still didn't fulfill, I feel, the needs of businesses holistically enough. The other issue that comes as a result of this is sort of resourcing for ESD service providers. So I can design a program for a client, but they would need to resource that program with coaches and mentors and training facilitators, etc., because obviously I can no longer go out and do those kind of things. So it comes back to how do they resource? And it's a conversation that Joseph and I had a few weeks ago as he was attempting to sign up a company I consult to for a corporate membership is how do they resource, and are their programs as impactful as they think they are? So they've got the best design possible, but it's in the implementation and that there's a problem. But also they find that they're unable to resource adequately. And there's two things, or there's two elements to that. The first one being unable to find people with the right skill set. And then the second one is obviously the financial implications of having to I suppose what they would call over-resource. Now, what simply means is if you have to customize a program to the participants in the program and they have different needs, you have to resource accordingly. So those are the two big challenges that ESD service providers are currently facing. We have great program design. We have program design that's evolving. It'll never be perfect, but it is evolving, and that's a step in the right direction. But how do we then justify to the client who's paying for the ESD program that actually, instead of where previously we had maybe one coach or business advisor to 15 or 20 businesses, we now need maybe 3 or 4 people, and there's a cost implication for that to service those same 15 or 20 businesses. So generally with corporates, money becomes an issue. And even though they'd like to see impact, at this point, I haven't yet found a corporate who has an understanding that, yes, there's a slight increase in cost, but the impact is far greater if you resource in those ways and you have really genuinely and truly custom fit programs or modes of support for groups of businesses that are placed on these programs. So what are the changes that I've started making and have been seeing some very impressive results on? I started piloting sort of early last year, incorporating what we call sort of immersions and experiential learning techniques. And so immersions have worked particularly well because you're taking a business owner out of their business, shock horror for them, and you're actually immersing them into a different business environment, but it's engineered in a way where once you have an understanding of the business owner and an understanding of the business, instead of sitting them down in a classroom and asking them to absorb a huge amount of theory and then taking them back to the business and asking them to implement it, you're now immersing them in it. So they're living that. It's an experience for them. And it's been well received both by corporate clients who fund the ESD programs. It took quite a hard sell for ESD service providers to take it on, but beneficiaries have lapped it up. And so I think in total since January last year, it's close to 500 business owners that have been through a program that has an immersion and experiential learning element to it. But that's been in addition to the typical training, coaching, consulting, mentorship, and advisory that's offered. So there's a combination of all these things. I've said there's no winning formula. And that's because, like I said, I have to go back to the drawing board for every single program that I design because there is no winning formula. But using the feedback that we get from programs that have had these elements, I can then iterate and design a program that's better fit. But then there's also things that we have to take into consideration, when you're working across the 9 provinces. I mean, little things like, all the big things like cultural differences, language barriers, etc. Also just what is the baseline of the entrepreneur when they come into the program, so those sort of things. Some of it can be addressed by a diagnostic. But increasingly what we've been doing, again, it's a budget thing with corporates who fund ESD programs, is the use of psychometric tools such as disc profiling, both on the coaches that we use. So we've been doing that particularly with the coaches that are being recruited into these programs, and the participants. So they both get profiled, they get debriefed individually, and then they have a joint debrief once we've matched them. And we found that coaching relationships tend to be sort of longer lasting. So they stand the test of time and they tend to be more fruitful, and impact tends to be higher using that method of profiling and then matching beneficiaries to coaches. We haven't used it with any other of the modes. I don't think it would work well for training. Not so sure on business advisory. as a silo if business advisors need to be matched in that way, but coaches particularly because they deal with things sometimes outside of the business realm. So yeah, I mean, ultimately the approach needs to be customizable per business within a bigger program, but all of this within the program design framework, and that's been the challenge over the last 2 years. But it's also finding new and innovative ways to deliver some of these things. And yeah, so I suppose it's a work in progress.
Yeah, that's really, I mean, you said a lot, by the way. We need to put our thinking hats on to digest all that. But you started off saying something very interesting. So yeah, you know, it's maybe fairly obvious that we must talk about the resources and the tools that we're going to use and the diagnostics and profiling and so on, you know, sort of. But you started off saying you've got a choice in terms of your approach, you know, sort of. So you've decided design thinking, human-centered approach and so on. And perhaps that's something that we haven't thought of properly yet in terms of our profession, is that there are in fact a range of approaches that people can. It's not only the mode that you choose, whether it's training or consulting or mentoring or coaching, it's also the approach within that mode.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you've got a thought or two on that, Fazine.
Yeah, absolutely. So previously, you know, there are various ways to do program design. Some of them are quite archaic. I've engaged with them before, but it then required me to really stretch myself and explore design thinking as an approach to designing these programs. And it was that one thing that spoke to me very loudly when I decided on it, and that was the use of empathy, which is, so design thinking has 5 pillars, and the first pillar was to gain empathy for the user. So it was that, it's an understanding of who are we dealing with, but at a very deep level. Before we can even go on to define what the problem is, which is the second step, or ideate, which is the third one, or prototype, or test. And then, you know, the last 3 are sort of iterative. But that very first pillar of empathy.
One example, sorry for interrupting you, but
no, that's fine.
For time. So that's one example of an approach, and I'm sure there are others. Maybe in the chat you can keep going on the design thinking there in the chat in terms of approaches. So if there are other people on the webinar today that are following specific approaches that they want to explain how it works too, then maybe just mention there. We can of course go do our own research afterwards too. So design thinking, go Google that, and you know, definitely there's something to say for, especially in terms of program design, that you can repeat to be following such an approach. We did put up another poll to ask one of the questions that Fazine referred to, namely tools to use or ways to use, systems to use to actually do an assessment for intervention planning. And the question there is whether you've got something going. Yes, we follow a process. Yes, but we're flexible. Yes, but it's kind of for the practitioner to decide. No, we don't have a process, or no, we allow practitioners to find their own way of doing it. So maybe if you can just indicate to us there what the way that you do it. We had a good 3/4 of people taking part in the previous poll. I hope we can do that again to get a good sense of where we're at in terms of using these kind of tools for ourselves. So Fazine, don't run away, because I'm sure you're going to have something to say by the time we have a discussion. But if we may move on to Grant, and Grant, if you just want to switch on your camera and your microphone from pre-risk. I'm not sure if I can typify that your approach more as consulting, but you can tell us about that, and also the process that you follow. Maybe I can unmute you if you're battling yourself and send you a request to start your video so we can see you too. Just accept that request.
Right.
There you are. So what is your take on the choices that we have in the way that we support entrepreneurs and business owners, Grant?
Right. Well, just to welcome you all listening.
So may I just ask if you can speak right into your microphone? We've got a bit of difficulty.
Hear me now? Yeah.
That's good. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Listening to the speakers, listening to the esteemed Johan and people who have been on this webinar before will agree that we are in challenging times, and the welcome I want to extend is to development and to actually evolve everything into a more formalized state. The actual introduction that I wanted to make was based on the company that I run, which we do business optimization. And in business optimization, a great deal of that is trying to be the best advisor you can. And the process that we have used is business process models. And the way we go about this is a softening way. It's a soft approach where we discover and ultimately try and work out and get a clear overview of what exactly is happening in that business. Now, most of you that have been in this business for a while will know that approaching a business for the first time, particularly smaller businesses, you will find that people are reticent to share and divulge information quickly. So what we try and do in a meeting is use the models which we have set for and try to anticipate what this particular business is going to be all about and what they do. So we talk very lightly about their visions of the future, their business statement, what their strategies are, and what sort of actions they're engrossed in or entailed at the moment. Invariably, it leads to financials. Most small businesses I've come across and have come across know very little about their financials. All they tend to say is that, well, we've got money in the bank and we're successful or not. So automatically budgeting and cash flow and income statements and margins and the lesser known of the four, the balance sheets, this all comes up. Very often, by just gentle probing, you can start to get a gut feel and the understanding of where the problems lie. Now, there are many models, there are many design steps and programs which can unravel this in other ways. So when we look at our sales and product processes, we can encapsulate it in marketing. So each person that is dealing with the actual dealing with the evolvement or devolving of a system, we can rearrange it in any way we want. It's flexible. So sales and product marketing could suddenly come together. When we get to processes like communications, then we can start to say, well, in an organization, what are the communications? It's a product within the company. What are the requirements? What do you need to do? Is the communication inward or outward? Is it going to be only an internal memo, or is it going to be statements? Is it going to be process, procedures, and policies? Or is it going to go out into the press? Is it going to go onto digital platforms? Is it going to go into blogs and all the new technology that's available? And that process, all those steps during this interview, during this soft touch where you're talking to the person, you start to get an idea of what is important to them. And we can then start measuring and start determining responsibility, who's responsible for what, and we can see the customer are the people that are going outside of the organization. The suppliers are people who are supplying what information is needed to be worked and matured. And whether that be a newspaper, a newsletter, or whether it be an external advertiser, there are all sorts of people supplying information there. So getting back to the actual process model, if we look at something like human resources, we can start to realize that although one might be a generous specialist, and you may know a lot about a lot of things, there can come a time when you need to call in the unfortunates of this world who are highly trained, highly specialized, and knowledgeable in those areas. Because up until now, we've been talking a bit about the operational issues in the business, but there are support mechanisms. Communications, human resources, and information technology can do that. You can then, of course, modify and mold this into any form you want. You can have distributions and procurement, storage, and warehousing. Now, how that all comes together is going to be helped and supported by the impression that you're getting of the you are in understanding what you're doing. Of course, here's the danger. If you get to this point now where you've got a broad understanding what's going on, if you've lost that client, or if you've lost the person that you actually want to impress, you're in trouble. So I always suggest that this needs to be a gentle approach, and by using this process model, it means you don't have to think too hard and start interrogating the system, interrogating it into what is going on in your business. So flexibility and a concern for the business always impresses this person. I believe this process, if you can get your head around it, it will allow you to establish whether your needs are consulting, whether your needs are coaching, whether your needs are mentoring, or training. So I believe that this particular mode.
So Grant, if I hear you right, what you're saying is to adopt a process, to understand the process approach, to understand the business, and then to analyze the different processes to identify what are the bottlenecks or the weak areas in that business is one of the ways that one of those methods or what we call the approaches that one could use in understanding what the issues are for a business to address. Or do I hear you right?
You can then establish your support mode.
Yeah. Yeah. So for in your approach, the approach that you follow, it starts with understanding the business processes, analyzing that processes through looking at financial information, interviews, and all of those kind of things, so that you can come to a conclusion in terms of what the correct mode of support would be.
Correct. And by touching on the different elements of the business through these processes, you are very often able to pick up some hot buttons. Most often when you're called into a small businesses because they're in trouble, or they want to grow, or they want to be financed. And those sort of interventions that you bring in will normally determine how to measure yourself at the end of the day and say, well, did I do a good job? And what are the measurements that are needed? I've used the process model purely because it's a simple one. It's flexible, and it does give you an end result.
Yeah. Great. So, I mean, that's kind of supportive of what we found in our survey, our poll that we just ran, asking what kind of impact assessments or what kind of assessments do we do before we plan an intervention. And I'm quite happy to report to you that we've got half of people on the call here today saying that, yes, that they have those tools, but they do have a level of flexibility. They don't take it as the be-all and end-all when a tool shows certain analysis, which I suppose comes with time in terms of learning that sometimes tools are a bit crude in giving you direction too. So, Grant, if I can ask you to hold those thoughts that you've mentioned now and bring that back into our discussion that we're going to enter just now. But before we do that, I want to introduce Nomvuyo Bengani. So, if you can, Nomvuyo, if you can unmute yourself and switch on your camera, so that we can introduce you for a different angle, perhaps, because ICF stands for International Coaching Federation, and being trained perhaps in a different approach, a different method from the process analysis that we heard from Grant now. So, what would your take be on coming up with the best way of supporting the clients, the small business and entrepreneurship clients that you're serving?
Is it still morning? No, it's already afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, I am Nomvuyo, and I'm truly grateful to be here. I just want to start by congratulating IBASA for the 20 years. Well done. Well done, IBASA. And, you know, I was inspired by Johan's quote that says, "I do not care how much you know unless I know how much you care." It's quite a profound quote, and it actually defines what coaching is, because where coaching starts is with the business owner or the entrepreneur themselves. So can I have my slide, please, Casey?
Carl, can you page to the next slide? So I think Nomvuyo wants the slide that talks to a topic. Yeah, but one back. Yeah, there you are.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. So basically, we all want the same thing. We want our clients to learn and implement the interventions that we provide them with. And we want them to implement those beyond our intervention. So even long after we are there, they must still be effective in applying those interventions. That's what we want. I am blessed to have been an entrepreneur who has received support before. Before I went into coaching. So that sort of gives me a 360-degree view. I know what I needed when I was still running a business before I was a coach. And I then have learned as a coach to have a different perspective. And I think, firstly, when we speak about coaching, what we need to be aware of is that it's defined differently by different people. Because the term coaching comes from from the sports environment, we often think that coaching is just showing how something has to be done. And in that context, it becomes the same as mentoring. And I've also found that other organizations define it differently. So I think before we even go further, let us see where I am coming from, and that is how ICF defines it. ICF, it's an organization like IBASA that is interested in creating standards for coaching, in the same as IBASA is interested in creating standards for business advising. For ICF, the focus is only on coaching. And this is how they define it. They define it as a partnering with clients in a thought-provoking, creative process that inspires them to maximize their personal and professional potential. Now, coaching is a partnering. So as a result, for myself, even though I know that I have so much experience in business, I've been in business for over 25 years, I know that I have the experience and there's certain areas where I have the expertise, but in coaching, we meet clients as partners. They are experts of their lives. They are experts of their situations, of their business. So we meet them at that. And the other thing is that coaching is about, it's a thought-provoking creative process. What that means is that in coaching, the main thing is asking questions that help the client to build self-awareness, to build knowledge of themselves, and to be able to look at a situation and be able to make that decision as to what is best for them in that situation. So the client has to find their own solutions. The coach is an expert at asking questions. So the coach might know other things, but his expertise is in asking questions. So, and where my interest in coaching started was in the fact that what makes us learn? What makes us learn as people? What makes us make the decisions that we need to make? What is it that there are times when we easily take advice and there are times when we don't? sometimes, I mean, you think of trying to lose weight, for example, that's a typical one. You know exactly what to do and what not to do, but sometimes you find yourself doing the things that you know what you are not supposed to do. So that is where coaching helps, because it helps the person be aware of their own belief systems that make them make the decisions that they make, so that they can implement them. Now, how we at Bees Oil do it, we put coaching at the center of our service, and we then work with consultants. We train, but we also work with consultants who would come in for a specific problem, and then when that is resolved, we continue the coaching relationship. That is how we work. So we work in collaboration with other people. Now, where we start by helping the business owner or the entrepreneur to understand what it is that they value. What is it that they are strong at? What are their passions? What is their purpose? And that is even before going into the purpose of the business, their own purpose. What do they want to contribute to this world? How do they plan? How do they prioritize? What networks do they have? Who do they know? So even before we go into their business, so that they can create their own business vision, their own business purpose, we start them here so that they get to know. We have a few sessions that comprise of workshops and training, in which and self-reflecting exercises, self-reflecting tools, in which they truly delve into themselves. Obviously, you know, knowing yourself is a process, so it can't be a once-off thing. But what we aim for is that in those first 3 sessions of intervention, they get more awareness of who they are and what drives them. And then after that, then we go into helping them set their own business visions and where they are in terms of skill, knowing where they are in terms of skill, what other skill do they need. They make the decision as to what kind of intervention do they need at that one point. So the benefits of coaching, as I've already said, it helps the entrepreneur to develop self-awareness and personal mastery. And they gain clarity about their business vision. What do they want out of their business? What strategy would be best? They based on the session, they become able to see what is good for them in terms of strategy, in terms of planning, yes, in terms of goals. They would have been trained, you know, but in practice, then they are taken into what do they want. Now, then we try and help to develop alignment between what they want and what the business requires. Because we find often that the reason why people sometimes do not implement things is because their personal needs are not aligned to what the business needs. So we help them through that. We partner with them through that. They get to find that.
And
yes.
Sorry to interrupt you there, but I've got 2 very important questions that I would love you to spend just a minute on before your time is up. So you mentioned other professional bodies.
Yes.
So what is how should that pan out for IBASA, who has these different disciplines, the mentors, the coaches, the consultants, the trainers? Are they then IBASA member and also another professional body member?
Yes, if we can pair up, for example, with another IBASA member on a specific intervention.
So my question is more related in general. So you mentioned that since coaching is a specific discipline within the broader range of business advising, that you are a member of the professional body through which coaching is attended to. But then what's the relationship for me as a practitioner? Should I then belong to a coaching federation and a IBASA, a business advising organization?
It depends. At the moment, because IBASA is where it is in terms of grading, particularly with regards to coaching, I would recommend that you be a member of a coaching organization as well as IBASA.
Mm. Yeah, and since coaching is fairly, I don't want to say newer, but perhaps it is for us here in South Africa, definitely newer as a discipline, as a mode of supporting. Would you say that someone that's been a consultant for many years or a trainer for many years can quickly switch into, is that option available for them? If the need is coaching, can they, as a consultant trainer, quickly switch into a coaching mode, and in what way?
What I would suggest, for example, for IBASA, to offer a coaching module for everybody, because where we are, we need to understand how people think, how they assimilate the interventions that we provide for them. We need to be able to build rapport and trust so that they can then go and implement the things that we are advising them. So I would recommend that there be a module of coaching for everybody. Not that people want necessarily to be coaches, but just basically to understand so that they can make their interventions even more meaningful to the client, because that's where it is, just making it more meaningful to the client, understanding how your particular client thinks.
Yeah. That's the starting point, of course, is serve the client. And I think that was one's first point too, is that is where we should start in asking what kind of support it is that's needed. And perhaps a thought may be that it's a team effort. It's never one discipline, and I think that's kind of a thread that I got from everyone representing, whether it was from ESD perspective or a coaching perspective, or whatever perspective it is we have, business process analysis, that there's always a combination of interventions, a combination of modes necessary, and that very rarely do you find kind of a pure solution that you can find. So coaching, those that are interested at the moment, is there a tip that you can give them, a reference? Can they go somewhere if they want to learn more about coaching? Those that aren't trained as coaches?
The International Coaching Federation has an office in South Africa, and Comensa as well. I think Comensa is a member of IBASA. They do have advice. I mean, they can give us pointers on coaching.
Okay, but your tip is IBASA should ideally actually be able to allow people the access to training and support in increasing their ability to play that mode of coach.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Great, thank you very much. Please come back with those ideas when we have the discussion. Our time for discussion, unfortunately, is not going to be too long, but we do have time. By the way, I've put up our third and last poll. Won't bother you with another poll. Is about whether you think the business advice industry should have a prescribed process for designing interventions. So should they be kind of go from step A to step D to step F, whatever it is that you need to follow in designing interventions or deciding what kind of mode there is. So you can vote there on the poll to indicate what your preference is, and we'll come back to that. We'll keep the poll open for a while if you have to think. Thanks, Sahar and Luther, for your questions. We'll come to them just now. But if I may ask that all the panelists may switch on their cameras at least, and perhaps their microphones too, so we can refer back to you very quickly. So we have two questions or two comments in the question sector. The one is from Sahar about tools. Now, if I may, Carl and Lesego, I'll come to you in terms of the chat just now too. So I asked questions about availability of tools, and Luther also talk about a baseline assessment. So these are kind of tools indicated. So thank you very much for the two of you for making those comments around tools specifically. What I got, and perhaps Carl, if you want to share that slide with us again with the graphic that Johan had on his presentation, that may help us in understanding that too. But I got from the discussion that our first choice basically is to understand, we need to understand this choice that we have, that we need to have a toolbox. And some of the tools may be me delivering, but some of the tools may be someone else delivering. And in that toolbox, consulting, training, mentoring, and coaching will sit alongside each other, and there's a continuum of from support to direction, and sort of the involvement of the two parties, the practitioner and the client, interplays there in that graphic, as you see in the graphic that's been shared there. So the discussion can really, we can evolve the discussion from here based on what we see in that graphic. But then in terms of the choosing of approaches, and I got that very strong from you, Fazine, is that you have to be clear about your approach. Understand your own approach, because you've made a choice in terms of what approach it is that you follow in making that assessment, and then use tools, because tools make it easier in implementing that approach. So if it's a human-centered tool approach, you're going to have tools like what Fazine mentioned, the DISC profiling and so on. If you follow more business process approach, then grant tools of analyzing business processes may apply. And then fourthly, resources. So this is the skilled people, the practitioners that you need to have, and the funding. And those two, of course, then also interplay. So there are kind of four things that really came out for me very clearly in our discussion here today, that as IBASA, I think the challenge is for us to keep going with those ideas and understand them better. So I'm not sure, Carl and Lesego, if they are from the chat or the questions. That we have the questions up now too. And the panelists, if you can all come into the room now and you can share your, we'll know that you want to speak when you unmute. There's also Susan or Susan also posted a question there that we can come to. But if I can go to Lesego, perhaps if there's a comment that you want to make or observation from the chat and from attending the webinar thus far.
Yes. In business, concepts are always moving and evolving as businesses grow. And the reason we are actually discussing the different types of support available is because here at IBASA, what we are saying is that business advising encompasses training, it encompasses mentoring, business coaching, as well as business counseling where it's needed. When you approach a business and then what they need from you, whether it's consulting, mentoring, or coaching, that's business advice. And the biggest challenge is ensuring that the greater economic benefit of SMMEs to the economy is realized. And that's when we can say that business advising with all its modes of support is actually working. I know a lot of people are asking the question on what do you do when you do get to a client and which mode works, but that should be the beginning where you say, I have all these available modes.
Looks like your internet
I can either train,
slow now, so we can't really hear you so well.
I can either give mentorship or I can coach. Oh.
Yeah, sorry for that. But maybe towards
the end. Can you hear me
now? Maybe if you switch off your video, then we can hear you better.
Okay.
We'll come back to you just now. So, Carl, is there something that you've noticed from the chat specifically? We've got some questions.
Just to round up.
Yeah, morning, Christoph. Yeah, I think what I've seen there, quite a lot of discussion, I think, regarding the ecosystem, that we understand the entrepreneurial ecosystem where business support, whether we call it business support or entrepreneurial support. I see also people differing on terminologies in the chat area regarding, are we calling it business support or enterprise support or entrepreneurial support, and naturally where that fits into the entrepreneurial ecosystem. Different views that I see there. I think from a IBASA perspective, naturally, we want to say we firstly focus on the entrepreneur, because the entrepreneur will create the vehicle, being called the enterprise or the business or whatever, that will you will use to get where he wants to go. So, and as I think Grant also referred to earlier, is naturally you've got to look, and I think Nombuyo also look at the entrepreneur, but then also look how they match naturally with the business or the enterprise, and what needs to happen in that enterprise to assist them to achieve their objectives. So quite a few different views, I think, in the chat, and I think this just proves again the importance of this discussion. I think this is the beginning of the discussion, not the end of it.
Yeah, so I hear you clearly saying we need to get clear on the words we use too, so that we understand the same thing when we talk about them.
Correct.
Yeah. So thanks for that. Lesego, maybe towards the end we can come back to a final word from you. Maybe the internet has repaired itself there. I just want to jump to the 3 questions that we have, if we may, and any of the panelists may jump in answering those. So Sarah is asking if there are any tools, specialized or general, available to assist with identifying and applying the correct mode of support. Luther has got a similar one. He says, if you require further input, I can give my baseline assessment approach before business acceleration intervention. So I wonder, Luther, if you want to share in that chat perhaps a link or something relating to that. But let's just refer to the panelists. The question is, how do we do assessment and what tools are available for us to do so? Anyone that wants to? Johan, you want to
go? Is my mic on?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. Look, it's this is actually an academic construct or a theory model which might not apply generally. And hence the reason I refer to the different scenarios that you encountered. There could be very basic, Luther refers to it as a baseline assessment, which is the term that we use. But I think it should be more than just a baseline assessment. It needs to be a comprehensive business analysis. And that's why we need to spend more time on this, because this will force you into a certain mode of thinking in terms of what the intervention should be. So, yes, I can't really tell you about the specific situational analysis process that one can use, because there are various ones.
So many, but so perhaps I thought you may have a preference yourself. So there's one that Luther is speaking of, and I've asked that you actually type into, if you can, Luther, if you can do that, then it's a reference for us. Perhaps any of the other panelists, Joseph, Lesego, and Carl too, if you want to comment. Tools that you use for baseline assessment, making, when you're planning your intervention.
Yeah, can I come in there?
Yes, please.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. With regards to the baseline assessment, our members, IBASA, normally we do have a tool, by the way. Yes, we do have a tool and that we use for that purpose, for baseline assessment, and various other tools that we use, especially with our partners, CEDA and like Gauteng Enterprise Propeller. We have used specific tools that we have designed ourselves, and some are tools that they themselves have that they allow our members to use. So there are tools that are there. And what we are currently doing with SITA, the IT government agency, they have invited IBASA to sit in a forum that is developing these tools. And also with ICBA, we are sitting on that institute where they are currently looking at an online ecosystem which will also have tools that can be used by business advisors. And those are going to be like open source for all business advisors to be registered in that platform, and also to be able to use various tools that will be there to assist them to support SMMEs appropriately. I hope that will help the discussion further.
Yes, great. So a magnitude of possible tools available. Looking forward to some new initiatives like the services CETA, putting some tools online that we can have free access to. That would be great too.
Yeah.
But I was wondering whether there are any other, and unfortunately we are kind of close to the end of the webinar now. I mean, this is a big topic, and I'm not sure this is not the last of the topic that we'll be covering either here or in some other platform. Susan is asking a question about culture and how that interplays in terms of our decision making when we come up with potential interventions for people. I never hear anything said about culture and business interventions. Like you and I do rural, where cultural influences the way that business is done. Without understanding culture in our diverse country, it would be difficult to reach sustainable success in interventions. What is the view of the panelists on this respect? So I'm going to, Fazine, I'm not sure if you're still on the tools, but you can speak about that still if you want to do. I just wanted to throw this dimension into it. So thanks for that take on what business advising and understanding the different contexts of people are, Susan. And then we also had a poll. So let me just finish off the poll quickly. I'm going to end the poll. By the way, we asked, should we have, and we'll publish the result just now, share the screen towards the end of the webinar. But most of us, nearly half, 45% say yes, we should have clear processes that will improve quality, but it should be flexible. You know, sort of. So yes, we need some guidelines, some process that is suggested, but it should be flexible because you can't have rules that apply everywhere all the time. So we'll share that result just now. But if I can come back to tools and culture, so Fazine, you've had your hand up to speak about that. One of those, I'm not sure which one.
Yeah, just to answer or a comment on Susan's Q&A question in her Q&A. I did briefly mention it. Again, I mean, I'm not pushing an approach, but that was actually the reason why I decided to go with the design thinking approach. It was because a lot of programs I was being asked to design and implement were in rural areas. And then there's things more than just culture. So there's culture, there's cultural nuances, there's language barriers. With 11 official languages, you can imagine the chaos and the mayhem in trying to implement something that was very standard at that point. And that's why we designed the program in that way. So that's the approach, but it feeds into how you deliver on the mode of support. So yeah, I mean, it's extremely, extremely important. It's also the other reason why a lot of my more progressive clients have chosen to go with the immersion and experiential learning type modes as well, because that transcends cultural and language barriers. So those are also, additional things that we can look to do together.
Yeah.
And
so
then on the tools,
part of the choice in method and tools can allow for those elements, preferably those. Is there perhaps, as I said, this is not the last of our discussion, so it will continue, I'm sure, in different forms. But is there perhaps for today's purpose a last comment that you would like to make, Fazine?
Just that I hope we continue the discussion offline as well. I just saw someone ask for my details, so I posted them. And also just on the tools, I think just everyone in the audience probably has some form of tool that they use, and it's about being able to collaborate and find, and develop a tool that then works in the various situations and for various sectors and with all the variables. Okay, now I'm going to shush.
Great stuff, yeah. So as IBASA, we are a professional body of members that are cooperating, so sharing is part of the game there. Lesego, I promised I was going to come back to you so you can finish your point, but then also Grant, Nomvuyo, Joseph, if you would like to make a final comment, and Johan, maybe you can wrap the discussion up for us since you've started it off. So first, Lesego.
Thank you, Chris. Going back to the discussion, at IBASA, we view business advising, whether you're looking at it from the intervention using training or consulting or coaching or business coaching. This is all a form of business advising, and that's the type of support. So we do look forward in creating a framework, because clearly people are looking for a framework, and use that framework to customize to assist businesses so that we can have more successful interventions. So IBASA is definitely pioneering, and I just want to invite all the attendees as well as the panelists, if there are any inputs you'd like to make into business standards for business advising, do take up the offer from the CEO, which is to contact him on ceo@ibasa.org.za to get a way forward so that you can bring in your input. Thank you, Chris.
Yes, thank you for reminding us about that too. So your final remark before I get to you, Grant.
Yeah, thanks again for this opportunity. It has been an interesting and eye-opening discussion. And, you know, I am totally behind IBASA, and because it is good that we have accreditation, that we have a common understanding, and we become resourced as business advisors to help our clients the best way we can.
Great stuff. Thank you very much. And Grant, the last comment from you.
I'm not sure if I'm actually on, right? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. My overview on the whole morning has been that the regulating, self-regulating, but at the same time bringing compliances and standardization is an absolute winner. And this webinar has been extremely helpful to me, having been out of the more formal channel of advising for quite a long time. I believe this is an absolutely excellent way of going about it. Thank you.
So that's a task that IBASA is taking forward. And Jamti, maybe you can comment about that for us, that the regulation and self-regulation and what is going to happen in the industry there.
Oh, can I go ahead?
Yes, please. And any other comments that you would like to make?
Yes. Yeah, let me agree with those that are saying let this discussion not end here, and we should continue even outside this forum. I fully concur and agree that we should do that. And currently, as IBASA, the industry is not regulated. Business advising industry is not regulated. We are currently self-regulatory. And we are in discussions with the Department of Small Business and many other professional bodies that attended the conference last year. Hence, I spoke of the roadshow, when, including the panels that the speakers who were presenting today, we would like to continue inviting them when we discuss this further. And indeed, we are looking at some form of regulation. I also ticked the 18% where we are saying there's got to be some form of regulation, but it's got to be flexible, you know, that we don't want a rigid kind form of regulatory environment coming from government. And indeed, the response from Nomvuyo, I agree with that response that those who would like to do coaching in a professional way, being advisors, it's advisable for them to become members of the Coaching Organization Institute, and that IBASA, to help those who would like to do coaching, should have a module that will help those. I fully concur and I agree with that should be.
I hope Nomvuyo realizes that making a suggestions mean also you volunteer to actually make it happen.
Yeah. Yes, yeah, no, and I would like in ending, really, I would like to thank the panelists. They have given us challenges and also insights about the profession. I thought my 40 years in the profession, it's something I know more than any other person, but today I've just been made to be more cleverer than I thought I was. And thank you so much for the information that you have shared with us and empowering us and the organization. And indeed, we are going to continue engaging yourselves for us to build this economy together. Thank you so much for having us build yourselves for this discussion. Thank you.
So I just realized I made a bit of a boo-boo here. I should have asked you on before you, Jamti, because that would have been the powerful end off of this webinar. but we still have have you on to maybe just and you want, perhaps you can share an idea in terms of how IBASA should take this discussion forward too.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, Christoph. Remember when we discussed this, we realized from the outset that in a webinar of an hour and a half, you cannot thrash all these things out. It's just a beginning of a long conversation. And I'm glad we decided to have it as a topic, or he decided to have it as a topic. I think if just looking at the participants' comments and even our panelists, this is a complex discussion that we have to have. And the one thing that we shouldn't be doing is to dilute this into, no, it's just semantics, because it's not just semantics. It's different approaches, it's different methodologies. And perhaps just as a last comment, and I'm glad Bro Joe is still there, maybe he can arrange for us, or IBASA can arrange for us, maybe a half-day workshop, or preferably a full-day workshop, where we have industry specialists, and we have them amongst ourselves. Our members are very, very knowledgeable on these things. They don't always join the webinars, but if we can get these people in, and that will also be a work in progress. You cannot thrash this out in a day as well. But let us just get on the same page as far as business advising is concerned, because remember, we're working with very limited budgets, and we have to maximize the time that we have as either mentors or consultants or coaches or trainers to the most, and therefore we have to have the right approach.
Yeah. So there's a very clear and practical suggestion, and thanks Lesego also for reminding us that the CEO invited people on the webinar today to email him at ceo@ibasa.org.za if they would like to participate in IBASA's forming of the ideas around this topic. So, and thanks Johan for instigating, for saying let's have this discussion. I see there are still some comments coming through here. So we're definitely going to have to, Patrick is asking for the slides. Don't stress, Patrick. Lesego and the team there in the office will very soon put up the video recording of the whole webinar on the IBASA website, so you'll be able to get it there. There's a menu item there with webinars. If you click on that, you'll see past webinars too. And Luther was speaking about a chat forum or something. So I think perhaps there's something to keep in mind too, because everyone does not live in Gauteng within a quick drive to a venue somewhere there. So there may be ways to interact with the IBASA membership on a wider basis too. Yeah, we are kind of like 10 minutes over time, and we still kind of over 50 people in the room. So that's clearly an indication that this topic is something of huge interest for every one of us. So thank you very much for everyone for enjoying. I think I enjoyed it, but for joining at least, if you didn't enjoy it, the webinar today. We really aim to use this as a way to up the level of quality support we can give our clients. And that's the purpose of our discussion here is, as Joseph mentioned, sort of our purpose here is to work towards economic growth through the small businesses that we're supporting. And that's quite a big task that we have. So we better take it serious. And the webinars is part of taking that project serious for us to empower ourselves to do that better. We're very open for suggestions of topics, by the way. So please interact with the IBASA office around that too, info@ibasa.org.za. If you have any topic to suggest, or if you think you've got something that you can hold in a webinar format with or without someone else, it could also be one person presenting something. So looking forward to get messages from you, from the attendees in that regard. But thank you very much, Nomvuyo, Grant, Fazin, Johan,
Christoph,
Carl,
Christoph.
And then if you want to give us a send off so that we can take our message forward there, that would be great, JMT.
Christoph.
Yeah, you may speak.
Please.
Yeah, you may speak.
Yes, yeah. Now, I just want to say to the panelists, they must expect an invite, and that they will be invited soon. I think it will be around June, where we are going to be engaging further on the issue of professionalizing business advising and the issue of standards. And I would like them to participate. And I think, Fazin, I told you already that you've got your work cut for you. And I see that you also have your work cut for you. And the grant. So we are going to be working together to build this profession going forward. And thank you again. Thank you
Thank you very much. Thank you for the participants specifically. I mean, the people that attended the webinar. Because it's happening too. So have a good next of a Tuesday. It's not going to be a long week, and enjoy the long weekend if you can make it a long weekend. Drive safely if you're going anywhere, and then we see you next month. So bye-bye, everyone.
And indeed, thank you to all attendees. Thank you so much. We sincerely appreciate your attending. And invite others, including your clients, please. Let them attend this information. It's open for everyone. Thank you.
Indeed. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.